Okay, so we're ready? All right. Give me a second here. Good evening and welcome to the City Council Successor Agency to the Redevelopment Agency Housing Authority regular meeting of November 9th, 2020. Would everyone please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to start with any changes to the order of the agenda tonight. Hearing none, we're going to go into a presentation now regarding the Emergency Operation Center plans.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Great. Well, it's a privilege to be here tonight. Thank you very much for the invitation. I want to introduce, let me see if I can take control here. Did you give me slide control?
Yes, it looks like it's just waiting for you to take the control, but you should have it if you move your mouse around. There you go.
Great. So let me introduce our team here tonight. Of course, myself here, I'm the district manager for California Water Service Bayshore District. We have our assistant district manager on the line, Mike Oots, our director of water resource sustainability, Ken Jenkins, and our regional community affairs specialist, Robert Seeley. Just briefly, we're going to talk to you tonight a little bit about our system information, our water supply, emergency preparation, as it was mentioned with the introduction, our infrastructure, and also water conservation. This is kind of a brief depiction of the service territory we have with California Water Service in California. As you can see, we're spread throughout the state. Primarily, though, showing you off to the right here, this is the Bayshore District. Some of the areas, the cities, some of the county pockets that we serve. The biggest areas being, of course, San Carlos, San Mateo, and South San Francisco. Kind of a general system makeup with some of the infrastructure that we have. This is for the entire Bayshore District. Is 522 miles of water pipes, a number of storage tanks. You can see they're close to 50. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Number of booster pumps, almost 5,000 fire hydrants spread throughout our systems, 53,000 service connections, almost 50 employees. And the majority of our supply really currently is 100% from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, also known as SFPUC, although we do have capability of producing approximately 5% from groundwater supply in a treatment plant that we have in our South San Francisco system. This is kind of just a general overview of a water system, not necessarily exactly what San Carlos looks like, but it kind of shows you kind of how supply is made up, where you might have surface supply, such as Crystal Springs Reservoir, off to the left, a groundwater well, and the blue lines kind of depicting the underground water piping that sort of distributes supply to your homes, your businesses, industrial, etc., throughout a community. If you can see, you can kind of see those little white water sampling stations. That's where we take samples on a regular basis to ensure water quality parameters are met throughout the system on a daily basis. You can see there on the first bullet just how many tests we conducted. This is just in the San Carlos system, not the entire Bayshore. 4,403 tests on 774 different water samples, looking at 102 different constituents just last year alone. And I'm really happy to say that we met all primary and secondary standards, and that's our expectation every day, and that's why we take those samples. We are also provide an annual consumer confidence report, also known as a water quality report, which really allows customers to take a look at that in detail, the constituents, the levels, and ask any questions that they might have. Next, I want to talk to you a little bit about something that's been in everybody's mind, and that's really just kind of emergency preparedness. And before I get into the slide in particular about the public safety power shutdowns and wildfire preparedness, we didn't prepare a slide particularly with COVID-19. Obviously, that's something in everybody's minds every day. I'm happy to say that we have protocols in place. We're at full staff, and we have been. And thankfully, we've been in pretty good shape in our Bayshore district because of those protocols. And of course, we expect that to continue going forward. And that's important to have the folks here every day, of course, just like with your staff, to do the functions that are important for water supply and water quality. With related to the public, the power shutdowns that we've had and wildfire preparedness, I'm going to start with the wildfire. As you can see in this slide, just kind of shows you the trend, the graphical trend there on the left of just the increase that we've seen in wildfire. You can see 2019 took a dip, which was good, but we were also affected by the power shutdowns, and I'll talk about that coming up next. Over the right, you can just see how much acreage has burned. And to be honest with you, that 2020 number, I believe, increased since the slide was prepared a little bit. Thankfully, we're kind of getting out of the wildfire season, which is good, but it's been an extremely bad year for us in California. And we've responded to a number of emergencies, thankfully not in the Bayshore district associated with wildfire. But we can't overlook that from the preparedness standpoint. And in 2019, new regulations were approved by the California Public Utilities Commission that really allowed these power companies such as PG&E, Southern Cal Edison, to name some of the big ones, to actually shut power off due to certain parameters, such with regards to weather, wind, humidity, etc., that might lead to power lines being damaged and sparking some of these fires up. That's really led us into planning and preparedness to be upfront with regards to that, because power is a very important aspect of producing water, boosting it throughout our system, maintaining pressure, and of course, for firefighters to have. Nothing worse than a firefighter trying to put out a fire and having that hose run dry. At one point in 2019, when these public safety power shutdowns really started, in our Woodside area system, they lost 22 facilities due to the power outage. And in our Bayshore district, we lost power to 16 of our critical pump stations and facilities. Thankfully, I can report that we planned and we had generators in place, some fixed, and a number that we actually leased ahead of time and had auxiliary set up. And thankfully, I can report that because of that, no one's water supply was actually impacted. Now, these power outages are much different than what we typically expect with a power outage. They last for a long period of time. In the case of the 2019 shutdowns, we were without power for 2 to 3 days at some of our locations. So those gen sets definitely got some use during that time. We also activated an emergency operations center, an EOC at California Water Service, that really helps us leverage resources, equipment, everything that we need to make sure that we can keep things up and running and respond as necessary. As I mentioned, we have a number of permanent gen sets along with the auxiliaries and the far-reaching aspects of being able to reach out to some of our other districts and personnel to help us if need be, as well as us respond and help them. So when we talk about infrastructure improvements, really it means a few different things, and it should mean to all of us, and that's safety, which we've been talking a little bit about, reliability, and obviously the emergency preparedness. Just to kind of highlight, these photos depict some infrastructure that's new in the San Carlos system that we serve, your city. We have new reservoir storage. Some of it is about ready to go online. It totals approximately 1.1 million gallons of new storage that obviously can be used for emergency purposes, but also peak demand. That's extremely important. Along with the emergency generation that I spoke of, you can see there in the center that white picture is basically a permanent gen set that's been installed at one of our critical facilities. And it's got an automatic transfer switch in place, which basically allows it to kick on as soon as it detects a power outage. Now I'm going to turn over the rest of the presentation to Ken Jenkins, and he's going to talk a little bit more about supply and water conservation. Ken?
Thanks, Ross. As Ross mentioned, we purchase currently 100% of our supply for San Carlos from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, and they get their water from a number of different sources. We develop a number of different planning documents to guide our efforts around supply and demand. You can see many of them here. I want to touch briefly on the last two, the water supply reliability study and our climate change work. The water supply reliability study, we just kicked off that work, scheduled to be completed by the end of next year, really focused on water supply options, what we currently have, if there's any gaps that we foresee into the future, and looking at ways that we may be able to diversify our water supply portfolio to ensure a reliable supply for the community. The second piece of that is our climate change work. And we are currently developing a water resources monitoring and adaptation plan. Take a step back and look at where we've been historically on climate change. Back in 2010 and 2015, we included language in our urban water management plan for the community. That wasn't required at that time, but we felt that it was an emerging issue and we needed to begin looking at it and its impacts to supply. We completed our initial climate change study in 2016. It was a high-level study, and we included an additional expansion of that study in our 2018 general rate case, and are currently developing that, and that is now our water resources monitoring and adaptation plan. That plan includes 3 phases. Phase 1, we're scheduled to complete by the end of 2020. It's really the foundational piece of the plan, includes a literature and tools review, looking at our previous study, and looking at any complementary research efforts by wholesalers and other suppliers. Phases 2 and phase 3, they are scheduled to be completed by the end of 2021. They will be looking at a facility level at all of our facilities, looking at various climate threats, the sensitivity of those threats and the magnitude, and then prioritizing our facilities based on that information to adapt and mitigate the impacts that we've identified. Phase 3 then is looking at our water demand forecasting as well as risks specifically to our water supply sources. We have a number of different programs on the demand side. So the supply piece is one side of the equation, and then we have the demand side, and that really is where we focus our conservation programs. So as you see, we have a number of residential programs. Just want to touch on the last one there, our Smart Landscape Tune-Up program. That really includes 3 components. If the customer signs up for the program, we have a contractor who will go out and do a landscape evaluation. We will approve installation of high efficiency devices to maximize the efficiency of their irrigation system. And that also includes identifying leaks that they may have in their irrigation system and potential repair of those leaks depending on the specific circumstances. Similar programs on the commercial side. We do have several items here that are unique to the commercial customers that we identify. We also have a customized incentive program for items that may not fall under a more traditional rebate program, that we can provide incentives based on estimated water savings. Just a look at our marketing material. We have a branded program around Conserve My California. As you can see here, that can be locally customized to Conserve My San Carlos. This is some of the material that we have available for our customers. And then our marketing efforts themselves include a number of different items. This is a sample of those. The first one there that you'll see is on Hulu, and that is an ad selector that customers can select the ad they want to see from us. And then the other 2 are really in-store grocery stores and other stores like that for hand sanitizer wipe stations and lane dividers. as you can see, we prior to the drought in 2014-15, we were already decreasing our gallons per capita per day, our water use, in order to meet the what is the 20 by 2020 requirements for demand reductions in the state. We had a sharp decline, as you can imagine, during the drought. The good news is that while there's been a slight increase, which would be expected after an emergency situation, we've largely held those reductions in place through last year, and we're seeing something similar in the numbers up to this point in 2020. So how do we do that? How do we meet those requirements? So this gives you an idea of the volumes that we've saved from our conservation programs. So those programs implemented in 2019 are estimated to save about 254 million gallons over the lifetime of those devices. And then if we go back to 2011 and look at all the programs we've implemented locally, those are expected to save about 2 billion gallons of water over their lifetimes. Last, I want to just touch on what's to come. I mentioned the 20 by 2020 requirements. This is the next step, state regulations around conservation and demand reductions. The state is currently developing those regulations and the specifics around those. So there's more to come on this, but I did want to give you kind of a preview, a highlight of what we're working towards with our planning efforts. And really, I would just end by saying that all of these efforts on the conservation side, the demand side, work hand in hand with the supply options that we're looking at, so that we can, in fact, have a reliable water supply for the community. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and present tonight.
Thank you, Ken. Crystal, I don't see any members of the public with their hands raised. Is there any questions from my fellow council members? I am not seeing any. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on now to public comment. This is usually for items that are not on tonight's agenda. And unless you tell me otherwise, Crystal, I don't see any speakers that have raised their hands. Or do you have somebody calling in?
Yes, it does look like we do have one person.
I just saw them pop up.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and let her in. Good evening, Natasha. You should be able to unmute yourself to speak. There you go. You'll have 2 minutes. And you should be able to speak now. Natasha, can you hear me? It looks like you are unmuted. Oh, you just muted yourself again. Okay. You're now on mute. But we can't seem to hear you for some reason. You might need to check your audio, which is located on the bottom left corner. It looks like she might be having some technical issues here. Mayor Collins, if we want to just give her a minute now,
Yeah.
Or if you want to just come back when she is able to fix.
Sure, let's do that. We can always circle back to her.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised to speak. Let's move on to item 6, the consent calendar. I wanted to ask Jeff, I did see that there was a presentation on one of the consent calendar items. Was there an intention to make some sort of presentation on it, or was that just in case?
Mr. Mayor, I was going to pull item E, if that helps.
Oh, okay. Then why don't we have a motion to approve the consent calendar minus item E?
I move to adopt City Council consent calendar items A through D and F through G. And item G.
Sorry.
Item G, adopting ordinance number 1567, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Carlos, amending Municipal Code Chapter 2.24, commissions.
Now I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Crystal, please call the roll.
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Palmer Lohan?
Yes.
Councilmember Rack?
Yes.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay, well, why don't we just deal with item E right now? Sarah, that was your request.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, Stephen, thanks so much. I wanted to just get a little more detail on the crosswalk improvement plans.
Certainly. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. So what's before you tonight is the 2020 traffic calming improvement projects. And so I just wanted to go a little quickly on what we intend to do. Okay, so what this project is we actually have 3 locations. 2 are in Britton. So the first one is at Britton and Woodland. The second is Britton and Tamarack. And the third location is at Crestview Drive near the Crestview Park entrance. Essentially what this project is really going to be installing some new rectangular rapid flashing beacons and signage. These are the beacons that you might have seen. They're very similar to the one that's located at Alma and Alameda de los Pueblos. In addition, we're going to have some bulb outs, and this as a result of some St. Carlos school that we wanted to make sure that the children have an area that's easy to cross, and actually the children can be seen when they're about to cross. Additional traffic striping, pavement markings, as well as speed feedback radar locations, primarily mostly on Crestview. And then we anticipated that the construction will start probably in January and last through March of next year. So the first area, as I mentioned, is on Britton Avenue at Woodland. So here, as you can see, Britton's here, Woodland's here. This location is Britton Park, and Laurel Avenue is kind of to your right, if you will. So as you probably are well aware, we currently have an existing crosswalk there, but no rapid flashing beacons. So what we intend to do is probably install the 2 rapid flashing beacons. We have the crosswalk, the ladder style crosswalk, as well as these pavement markings, and commonly referred to as sharp teeth. And that just kind of delineates that, the rapid flashing beacons are actually coming up. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to actually bulb out. Again, this is to kind of bring the pedestrians who are waiting at the corner in a little bit better sight line for the drivers to be able to see that pedestrians aren't attempting to cross the street. So this is the first location. Second location is just west of Woodland. This is on Tamarack. As most of you know, we currently have kind of an older style of beacon at the corner there. This is a little bit rounder. Unfortunately, that's really what age, it's probably not as efficient. So we decided to actually change these beacons over to the more rapid flashing beacons themselves. Similar to what's going to be at Woodland, you're going to continue to have your ladder type crosswalk, your markings, your bulb out, as well as the 2 beacons themselves. And then the third location, as I mentioned, this is on Crestview, right at the entrance of Crestview Park. Here it's a little bit different. As a result of Crestview Drive being very wide, we actually are able to put somewhat of a median, a painted median. However, we will have a refuge island right in the middle. Again, this is to provide a refuge spot in case somebody who wants to cross one lane but perhaps gets caught in the middle. They have a spot where they could actually pause and allow other cars to pass in the opposite direction. This is very similar to what's going to be happening at Woodland and Tamarack. We're going to have the ladder style crosswalk. You have the rapid flashing beacons. We do have a slight bulb out, but these bulb outs probably really won't work very well here just because the Crestview is so wide. As I mentioned earlier, these areas will be painted, so they're not raised medians, but the refuge will actually be a raised median where offers some protections for people crossing the street. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we intend to put some speed feedback signs probably just to the north and south of Crestview. This is to allow, make sure people understand, that there's a crossing coming up and that they should need to be aware of their speed. So that concludes the presentation for this project. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Stephen. I do see a member of the public who wanted to make a comment. Crystal, do you want to bring them in?
Yes. Dion Teeple, Peninsula Starlight. You should be able to unmute yourself now. And if you want to introduce yourself before you begin, that'd be great.
Hi, Dion Teeple. And sorry, all my Zoom is with my Rotary Club, so that's why I have my Peninsula Starlight. I'm actually a resident on the corner of Britton and Greenwood, which opposite of that is Tamarack. So thank you so much for putting in new safety measures for these pedestrians. I'm sure many of you have seen my emails saying it's such a bad intersection. Just two things. I just wanted to say that out of the 45,000 cars that drive Britton per week, I don't think they pay attention to flashing yellow. It would be great to have flashing yellow that turns to red to stop for all these kids that come down from the school, all the residents during Christmas with eucalyptus. There's thousands of people in, and it'd be great to have a red light, have it to turn red for the cars to stop. The other is the push button on the pole. I think you are going to move the pole, but it's so far back from the crosswalk that people do not even know that there's a push button there. So those were just my only two things before you started that you might want to take into thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion.
Thanks.
I don't see any other members of the public wishing to speak, so let's go to questions. Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Steve. One quick question I had is, in various of these locales where we're putting either augmented or new crosswalks in, have we considered, why wouldn't we make the crosswalks themselves raised? I mean, what particularly caught my eye on Crestview, we always have problems with people reporting speeders on Crestview because of the way Crestview is designed, and that may or may not apply to some of the other locales you were talking about as well. But why not raise the crosswalks so they act kind of as a little bit of a speed hump?
So in particular, probably more specifically on Crestview, one of the reasons why we don't really want to have raised or any type of elevated device is, unfortunately, people will go very fast. And when they do hit these ramps, whether they're ramps or speed bumps or kind of raised crosswalks, sometimes the cars, they number one, could either lose control because they're not expecting this raised device, or they could actually go airborne. And one of the concerns, and I know I've had several conversations with the chief about having any type of device on the downhill side where cars actually, drivers can lose control, and he has seen where cars actually go airborne and then they crash into either parked cars or, worse, pedestrians. So we really don't want to consider kind of a raised crosswalk. I think number one, that's because of that safety concern. The other thing is having some of these raised crosswalks. It does create a certain amount of noise when cars pass over it. And so if you're living close by, you're always going to hear that little thump noise as cars drive over these raised devices.
Thank you. I guess I will, out of my own curiosity, follow up with you and the chief separately. I understand the argument. I'm not sure I buy it. It's almost because one aspect of it, as I'm sure you realize, is essentially what we're sort of saying is, well, there are some situations where the speeders are just taken over and, well, we just have to live with it. And that just strikes me as exactly the wrong thing to do. But thank you for answering my question.
All right, next is Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Stephen, for your presentation this evening and your I know that you've been working on this for a long time, so I appreciate all of your efforts to make our streets safer for children and residents crossing. I have two kind of follow-up questions. I'm wondering if you would like to respond to Ms. Teeple's suggestions. Do those flashing beacons ever go yellow to red? And are we moving the beacon kind of out to a more visible area?
So let me answer the last question first. I think the intention is to, because we are doing more of the bulb outs currently, I don't believe there are bulb outs there. Because we are doing the bulb outs, we want to push that poles and as well as the actuators out further or closer to the crosswalk themselves. So the answer to Ms. Teeple's question is yes, the intention is to have it closer to the crosswalk as compared to further back where it currently is at now. In regards to having a yellow rapid flashing beacon go to a red light, I'm not aware if that device exists. That is somewhat approaching a traffic signal device, and certainly that's something that we haven't really done an extensive study on. As you may be aware that whenever we do any type of signal, or for that matter, even a stop sign, we do have to do a warrant study. And we didn't do a signal warrant study at these intersections.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And then my last question, I noticed in the packet that some street parking is going to be removed. How much? Is it just a little bit to accommodate the bulb outs, or I couldn't understand that on the diagram if it was listed.
Yes, it's probably going to affect all four corners of the locations on Britton, Tamarack, and Britton and Woodland. This is a result because we need to accommodate for some of the bulb out, as well as providing sight distance to make sure we have clear sight distance. So, we expect it may affect maybe 4 spaces on street parking.
Not consecutive, though, just a one parking space on one side of the curb and one parking space on the other side. Okay, got it. Okay, thanks so much, Stephen.
All right, next is Laura.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Collins. And as far as the questions, thank you, Councilmember McDowell, for asking those. So I appreciate that. I was going to ask some of the same ones. And I just wanted to also echo my thanks for staff in following up on these safety improvements. I know that we've had a lot of discussions over the last year or so about the want to increase pedestrian safety. So I think this goes a long way in that direction and addresses some important intersections.
All right, thanks, Laura. I don't see any other hands, and I don't see any other members of the public that wanted to speak. So I think we need a motion to approve that consent calendar item.
I move to adopt City Council consent calendar item G.
It's item E.
Oh, E.
I will second.
You had me going there for a second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Crystal, please call the roll.
Before I do that through the chair, I just wanted to mention that it looks like Dion is raising her hand to speak again.
Yeah, so just as I said, please call the roll. I did notice that. Yeah, why don't we let her make her comment.
Okay. Dion, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Sorry about that. It's always at the last second. So San Mateo and Redwood City do have the yellow to the red lights for their pedestrians. And it really does make a big difference. And I really feel all these cars do not pay attention to yellow. They're so used to it. It's not even gonna, I mean, anything you're doing is a big help. Thank you so much. And I appreciate your effort on it. But if we could look at those that do switch to the red light. Thank you.
Stephen, I think she's referring to, the ones we see on El Camino. Is there a difference there?
Perhaps I misunderstood what she was. I think she was saying the Hawk style signal.
Yes, the Hawk style. Right.
Yeah. So very similar. I mean, it is a traffic signal, so that's something that we would still have to do a warrant study to put the Hawk signal, at any intersection. In fact, one of this one project, and we do intend to bring a similar project back to the council. We wanted to change out the signal or the flashing beacons at Belmont and El Camino. Unfortunately, because El Camino is part of the state highway, we have to go through the Caltrans processing. And so rather than try to maybe delay some of the 3 projects that were before you tonight, we decided to remove that set portion of the project out as we work through the Caltrans process. But that will have a solid signal. And that intersection, we needed to do a performance study.
The one at Belmont and El Camino.
Belmont and El Camino, that's right.
Well, and perhaps we might see how this works out with Britton and Woodland. And I mean, if it greatly addresses the issue, then that'll be, you know, we may not have to do anything else, but if it doesn't, I suppose we could come back to you and ask for a study at some future point in time.
And we'd be happy to do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Let us have our roll call, please.
Okay. Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parma-Lohan?
Yes.
Councilmember Rack?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes. All right, we're going to move on now to item 7, reports to council. We're going to have an update on our COVID-19 responses. And Tara, I believe you're up to give that presentation.
I am. So I'm just trying to do all of these things with my computer. All right.
Welcome to my world.
All right. So first, start the video. There we go. Got my voice on. I just have my notes in front of me, and it's hard to do everything at once. Yes, thank you very much. This is a really brief update, and as usual, it's just an update from our last council meeting. So this report begins on the 27th of October. And on that day, San Mateo County fortunately moved from the red tier to the orange tier on the state blueprint for a safer economy, which means that we had moderate COVID-19 spread on that date. And that action allows for further opening of the local economy, including more capacity at some businesses and restaurants, and the opening of breweries and bars for outside service. There is a chance that the county could move to the yellow tier as early as tomorrow. However, with the positivity numbers going up both nationally and statewide, the state is now concerned about further opening, and we might find that we don't get to go to yellow. One of the concerns that the state is stating is that gatherings of people from outside a household seem to be increasing, particularly with the holiday. The last one was Halloween, and they feel that people are just letting their guard down, and they'd like to ask that everyone be vigilant, wear their masks, and socially distance. They understand there's COVID fatigue, but it's important to continue to follow the guidelines and to be safe so that the Bay Area continues to have good numbers. Crystal, would you go to the next slide, please? Great, thank you. Just a quick testing update, which is very important to the county. This is a priority for the county, and they continue to expand as much as possible. There's the mobile locations that are constantly switching between the north and the south county. There's also the continuous testing at the event center, which also includes children. There is a capacity up to 5,000 a week, and the results have been coming in quite quickly. They're saying 72 hours, but it's been quicker than that. The state has put in resources as well as the county to try to get these tests, the turnaround time quicker. You can schedule an appointment at www.projectbaseline.com. We encourage everyone to get tested, even again, if they think they've been exposed. And there's more information on the county's website at www.smcgov.org/testing. The county is also traveling to hotspots in certain neighborhoods that have a high positivity rate. None of these hotspots have been identified in San Carlos. And there is a free event coming up on Saturday, November 21st from 12 to 3. This is for veterans who would like to get tested for free. It's at the American Legion on El Camino Real in Redwood City. So you can contact the American Legion if you'd like to get more information about that particular event. It's just a one-day event for veterans. Crystal, if you go to the next slide, please. So vaccine update, as most people have been hearing, Pfizer has announced that they have a vaccine with 90% effectiveness at preventing COVID-19. And this is a vaccine that is expected to roll out fairly soon. It should be noted that the state of California wants to review all the safety and efficacy of any approved vaccine to make sure that they truly can do what they're advertised. And then the state will be prioritizing first responders and healthcare workers as the first people to receive the vaccine. In the meantime, they ask everyone to stay vigilant because mass distribution will not be occurring until the middle of next year. And you know, it's going to be a voluntary basis. So it'll take some time for everybody to get inoculated. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Tara. I don't see any hands raised, but I will make the comment that I got tested last May and I'm getting it tested again on Wednesday. It is a pretty easy process. I'll be over at the San Mateo County Event Center and I really need to get tested so I can see my new granddaughter. So. Oh,
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you, thank you. Laura, you had a question. You're muted.
Thank you, Mayor Collins. I concur that testing at the event center is very seamless and easy to do, and I really appreciate that that's available to people. So I encourage anyone who is concerned about it to definitely take advantage of that opportunity. Tara, I just wanted to talk about a couple things with respect to the Downtown Sheriff Patrol. So I spoke with a business owner who hadn't seen the patrol downtown for a period of time, and then one day they did notice them out there. And I'm just wondering if it's not being done already. Is it possible for those deputies to just stop in and say hello to the shop owners and introduce themselves so they're become familiar with one another and kind of build that rapport?
Great. I think I'll let the chief answer this one. Chief, if you'd like to respond.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, Councilmember Lowen, we can do that. That's what the deputies are doing. What business are we talking about? They're doing that already. Is there a specific business? Or
it was one of the retail businesses. I'd received a few emails from them concerned about some of the mask enforcement issues. So I'd been going back and forth with them on that. And it just occurred to me that maybe if the deputies aren't doing it, if they could just kind of stop in at the various merchants and introduce themselves to the proprietors to build that sense of community.
Okay, that's part of our statistical information. We do business checks, but I'll reinforce that and make sure that that's done.
Great. Okay, and then while I have you, I'm also getting I got another concern expressed with respect to table spacing compliance on a section of Laurel Street. So could you just give us an update in terms of what the protocol is at this point and if everyone is adhering to those guidelines?
Well, most of the tables are set. They've been overseen by code enforcement and how they're being set up. And the deputies are making sure that people are compliant with masks and social distancing and such. But that is more of a code enforcement issue. But all the tables are marked accordingly and where they belong. And based on what we've seen, they're 6 feet apart.
Stephen, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you. Yes, as the chief has indicated, I do send out my staff to go check on the tables. What we really have been doing is actually requesting all the restaurants to mark their table locations using some highly visible tape. And that this way, number one, it does help their staff when they set up their tables in the parklets, knowing where the tables should reside, and then also provide some comfort that the tables are at least a minimum of 6 feet apart. And so, unfortunately, what we have seen some activities, and we have talked to some of the proprietors that, occasionally their patrons or perhaps even their wait staff move the tables around to accommodate perhaps a larger family. But we also tell them that, they need to, try to comply. We realize sometimes that will happen as a result of maybe perhaps a bigger family getting together. But we also want to make sure that the tables are, a minimum 6 foot apart.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And then I'm not sure who to take this one. I don't know if it's Chief Dury or not, but with respect to parking enforcement, I heard that there's a kind of a speculation that parking enforcement is not currently occurring, and with our new temporary parking spots, that would effectively render them not useful. So could you speak to kind of what the current approach is to parking enforcement?
Yeah, our parking enforcement, we curbed, sorry for the pun, our parking enforcement during the COVID time and during shelter in place, but we're back in full force. So our parking enforcement, we're full staff and we're enforcing parking, time parking and parking on Laurel Street and all throughout the city.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the updates.
Sorry, we'll move on to Mark.
Thank you, Ron. Comment I wanted to make, I thought the discussion between Vice Mayor Palmer Lohan and Stephen, the chief, was useful. But I want to remind folks that while it was absolutely anecdotal data, the largest reason why people who don't patronize downtown have stopped patronizing downtown when they used to was fear of COVID-19, which, I mean, is hardly surprising. But, I think it's worth us remembering that these aren't just a matter of, in a sense, a matter just of code enforcement. It's actually a matter of creating the perceived environment that people will believe is safe enough that they can come back out, which will be, if we can do that, would be enormously helpful to all of our businesses, not just the restaurants, but to the retail stores. So I would really strongly encourage staff, however they can think to do it, to kind of get the word out there and really make it clear that we are working hard to keep things safe and ensuring compliance with the rules, because there's a perception that we're not, and that's what's causing many people not to come back to downtown.
All right, thank you, Mark. I don't see any other hands raised, either from council members or the public. So thank you, Tara and Stephen and Chief Dury. That's great. All right, now we're going to move on to new business item 8A. This is consideration of setting an end date to the temporary Laurel Street closure. And I believe we have a presentation on that, which will be Steve Machida.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. What's before you tonight is we wanted to discuss a little bit of consideration of the setting of an end date, or the setting and criteria for the temporary Laurel Street closure. So back in June, the City Council adopted this program, and this mainly was for the closure of the 700 block of Laurel Street, as well as parts of San Carlos Avenue, with modifications approved by the city manager and ratified by the City Council. This was in response to the shelter-in-place order, and the program is currently scheduled to conclude on December 31st, 2020. So the the program meets all objectives, providing socially distanced dining opportunities for residents while allowing businesses to generate revenue despite restrictions on indoor operations. With the winter weather that's approaching, it may make outdoor dining and shopping less appealing. Back in September 14th, the City Council considered establishing a new end date for the program. However, a decision wasn't made as a result of the weather still being relatively still nice. So staff actually continued to survey the end dates of other peninsula cities in the downtown dining and street closure programs. Most of the cities actually amended their program end dates due to the continued health and economic threats. So what we found is the end dates fall into 3 different periods. It's either in December, sometime in March, whether it's beginning of March or end of March. And then the others have really haven't made a determination, or they have or wanted to kind of open up the area at the end of the health order. So these are the cities that we actually surveyed, and these were the very similar ones that you saw back in September. So as currently you can see, San Carlos, we're still in December 31st. Palo Alto, I think they changed it back in September as well. They had 31st, and that's for their just basic parklets. However, those parklets that actually had a little bit more, or they call them platform parklets. So those would be very similar to the parklets that had a platform flush with the sidewalks. I believe those were extended to September of next year. Menlo Park, they recently extended their program to the end of February. San Mateo, March 1st, and Belmont continue to have it at March 31st of next year. And then the 3 following cities, Mountain View, Redwood City, and Burlingame, they had an indefinite period. They haven't really made a decision on exactly when to open their program, but they wanted to really keep it open until the end of the state of emergency. So one of the other things that, I think staff really wanted council, or perhaps we should consider, is as daylight savings has ended, for the most part, it is getting cooler. And we do know that the proprietors will probably want heat and light in the parklets. And so extending the power to the parklets, can be challenging. From the very beginning, we actually told all the encouragement permit holders that any portable propane heaters are allowed. However, they cannot be used under any type of umbrella, tent, covering, or canopy. In the meantime, we have had discussions with the fire marshal indicating, he wanted to kind of stress that, again, portable propane and corded electric heaters are not allowed under any parklet covering due to safety concerns. Obviously, it's pretty clear why the portable propanes under a tent would be a little bit dangerous for fear of the material could catch on fire. The corded electric heaters, his concern there, as well as mine, they tend to be tripping hazards, especially when you bring a cord or extension cords across the sidewalks. And so some type of corded heater, electric heaters would not be allowed. However, if the parklet did not have any type of covering, the portable propane heaters would be allowed. One of the concerns that we had is, because the portable propane heaters would not be allowed under any type of covering, the next best option is to extend electrical service from the building to the parklet itself. But that can't be just handled by cords. In other words, what we were expecting is that they would have to hire an electrical contractor, prepare design plans to extend from the service panel out through their building and across the sidewalk to the parklet itself. Doing that work will probably range, we estimate, between $2,000 and $8,000 per parklet. Obviously, that's a big investment. So what staff is doing is also collecting surveys from impacted businesses to assess interest in the program extension, and then ascertain if businesses wish to invest in the extension of electrical service to the parklets. Well, I should go back. Unfortunately, the survey just went out Friday, so we haven't really received any feedback just yet. However, that's something that we definitely would like council, provide that information to council for your consideration. So as I mentioned earlier, we saw 3 different time periods that kind of came out of our surveys. End of December. So at the end of December, we figure the business may not wish to extend electrical service to their parklets due to the short implementation timeframe. Basically, December is, about a month and a half away, and, they may not be able to get the return on their investment. Shopping and dining, if they don't extend this electric heat or light, shopping and dining areas may not be fully utilized. However, curbside and takeout will continue. Businesses could close if expanded or continued indoor shopping or dining is not further allowed by the health order. The second period we talked about is either March, kind of early or late March. Businesses, again, may not wish to extend electrical service due to the cost and the rate of return or the return on investment. The program will come to an end in March, just as the weather starts to improve for springtime activities. And then, as with all these events, the curbside and takeouts will continue. And then lastly is the undetermined or end of health order. As I mentioned earlier, curbside will continue. This option seems to have the maybe best benefit in that sense. It allows businesses to continue outdoor operation through the holiday season and beyond, which may reduce the economic damage and maximize the return on the parklet investment. So some of the options for the council is, to keep the end date of the temporary street closures on December 31st, set an end date for the temporary of Lower Street closure in March, sometime in March, whether it's beginning, end, or a date that council desires, or set an end date for the temporary closure at an undetermined date or at the end of the health order. The last option is to set an end criteria for temporary street closure or provide an alternate direction. So with that concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Stephen. Well done. Crystal, I see we have a couple of guests that would like to speak.
Yes, it looks like we have two in the queue right now, so we'll bring in our first one. Oh, one just dropped out. So the first one will be Chris Templin. You'll have 2 minutes, and you can use the timer bar on the screen. You should be able to unmute yourself now. Chris, are you able to unmute yourself? There you go.
Yes, thank you. Hello, council members. I am Chris Templin, and I run Tourist Steakhouse at 727 Laurel Street. Thank you for the work you've done, you and the city staff, on behalf of the Laurel Street businesses. The street closures and parklet program in specific have been very helpful, and I want to ask you to consider continuing the program and eventually making it permanent. We need to do everything we can to ensure small businesses on Laurel Street can remain in business and keep all my staff employed. And, that's it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Okay. So we have Kit Flood next. Kit, you should be able to unmute yourself right now. Kit Flood, are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, I see another Kit. There's another Kit.
Looks like we have two Kits.
Yeah, so let me try allowing the other Kit to unmute.
There you go.
There you go.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay, there's someone else is using my phone, and they'll speak in a moment, but they're using my phone because it's the only way we could get connected. Anyway, my name is Kit Flood, and I'm the owner-operator of Faith and Spirits at 765 Laurel Street. We anticipate opening as soon as next week and are currently interviewing local candidates. We have completed construction of our temporary parklet, and it was an expense we were more than happy to incur. We hope the existing program will continue indefinitely so that we can run our business as normally as possible in such an uncertain environment. The city's flexibility has been very helpful. Many of the local businesses in Laurel Street have been in communication and plan to remain organised as a result of COVID. Our goal is to better communicate with city staff and council to understand solutions require cooperation among all. Thank you again for considering the extension of this program. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kit.
I'll go ahead and unmute them now.
All right.
Kit Flood, you should be able to unmute yourself right now.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can. It seems like there might be an echo though.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Hello?
Yes.
Hi, yes. My name is
There's a lot of background noise. I don't know if you're able to step away somewhere. Oh, I see that you just muted yourself. Kit, are you able to unmute yourself? I wonder if she's just maybe going to another
It could
quieter
be.
place.
Do we perhaps want to have our next speaker bring her in? We can always go back.
Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and move down to Chris Davis for now. Chris, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Great.
There you go.
I would strongly hope that you would end the street closure at the end of December. It's bad enough going through Christmas without parking spaces. And my phone calls for customers that don't come downtown is because they can't find parking anywhere on the street near the stores. That, and from a standpoint of being afraid of COVID, they don't care to walk from a parking space far away by the restaurants where people are eating without masks on. So I would like you to take that into consideration, because I know I'm not the only retailer. I mean, I feel very badly for the restaurants. They seem to be doing not too bad, making huge investments for their outside areas, which how they're going to make that up, I have no idea. I'm sure they're just hoping that you continue with the closure of Laurel Street. So that's what I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
We have another speaker.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and bring Jeremy Kafaroglu. Sorry if I butchered that. Jeremy, you should be able to unmute yourself right now. Jeremy, can you hear us? If you can, please go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, sorry, that's just my son's Zoom name. You know, my name is Mus Kafaroglu. I'm the co-owner and the operator of Stamp Bar and Grill, 773 Laurel Street. And I'm speaking on behalf of my staff in support of continuing the parklet program with pedestrian street access. Our businesses opened right before COVID, and it was very challenging for us as a new business. The parklet program and outdoor dining has been very helpful to our business, allowing us to remain open, employ our staff, and serve our customers. In addition, the street closure has ensured the safety of our customers by the COVID-19 restrictions, and we have enjoyed the foot traffic and found that it has brought new customers from all over the Bay Area to our doors. Please continue to support local restaurants and merchants with this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we want to try Kit Flood again?
Yes, Kit, you should be able to unmute yourself.
There you go. Yeah.
Hello? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Rose Tran, and I'm the owner of Sakura Teppanyaki and Sushi Restaurant at 744 Laurel Street. We truly appreciate this parklet program and the street closure. Our business has been challenged during this time, but we appreciate the city's efforts in looking for solutions. On behalf of our employees, we ask that you continue to be creative in limiting the car traffic and encouraging foot traffic among new outdoor spaces. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Rose. Do we still have another speaker, Crystal?
I'm not sure if it's the same one, but let me go ahead and try to bring them in and give that a try. Hold on a second. I think I need Jeremy's jumping around here. Disable. Okay. Kit Flood, it looks like your hand is still up, or someone who's using Kit Flood's account.
No, it should be done now. I'll take care of that. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. I'll go ahead and lower that. Thank you. And looks like we do have another one. Stephen, you should be able to unmute yourself now. There you go.
Good evening. My name is Steve Salazar. I'm with Sneakers American Grill, 644 Laurel Street. We're on the side of the street that reopened to traffic. So I'm unable to build these elaborate parklets like everybody else. I do think that extending the date for the parklet program should be to the end of at least March 31st. I think by that time, we're going to probably have enough percentage of use inside the building to make up for the difference that's outside. Thank you for what you've done, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Steve. Crystal, looks like we have another speaker.
Yes. Let me work. Hold on a second. Caller with the phone number ending in 364. You should be able to unmute yourself now by pressing *6.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. Ready.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, so for everybody, my name is Brock, and I represent Spazo Blind Tasting, Pillows, and Ultravez at our upcoming restaurant. I really appreciate everything the city has done to assist in the parking lot program. It's made a big difference in keeping our business throughout these several months. I want to lend my voice in support of continuing the parklet program indefinitely. I believe we are all here for that reason. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity you guys give us to speak and help us through this bad times.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, was that it? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, look, I saw Kit's hand raised back up, so let's go ahead and try to allow Kit.
There's a lot of people named Kit tonight.
I think it's one account with a lot of people there.
Hey, how you doing, man? Hello. How are you?
Hi.
My name is Cedric. Hello, Council. My name is Cedric. I'm from Seventh Sky. So I'm from Panzi Italian Bistro at 777 Laurel Street. And I would like to say, we hear for our customers how much they enjoy to being able to dine even during times of this COVID restriction. As winter approaches, we are prepared to serve customers both indoors and out. We hope that the city is equally prepared to work with us and continue to parklet street closure program. If you guys can help us, that would be really good, and we'll really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Cedric.
I think that was the last public speaker on this item.
Okay, great. All right, well, let's go to questions from council. First up is Mark.
Thank you, Ron. Steve, I just had a quick question and a brief comment, but the question is, with the new rules being in the orange tier for indoor dining, I think I remember reading someplace that it allows for a restaurant to be operated at the lesser of 50% of capacity or 200 patrons, whichever is less. How does that compare to the capacity that the restaurants are gaining by being able to operate in the parklets? It almost seems to me intuitively like the indoor dining capacity is actually equal to, at this point, is equal to or greater than, and for most of them, the parklet capacity.
So obviously some of it really depends on the size of the indoor capacity they have now. In some instances, you might have a building who's relatively smaller, and they just might be located in an area where they could expand their parklets. So in those cases, the parklets, the outdoor dining actually could have more seats than perhaps the indoor. However, I would agree with you for the most part. It probably approaches, I would say on the most, it probably approaches, based on the orange tier, outdoor and indoor, are probably approaching the same number of seats.
Okay. Just as an aside, if we don't end up resolving this tonight, understanding that balance on a case-by-case basis in aggregate, in other words, not just speculating, that might be a really useful piece of data to have for staff to be able to generate somehow, at least some estimate of it. The brief observation I wanted to make is, I don't know if anybody else noticed, but I found it very interesting that every single person who spoke in favor of extending the end dates either owns or operates a restaurant. And the only person who didn't own or operate a restaurant who called in opposed extending the end dates. I think there's some interesting food for thought there.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Stephen, I have two questions for you. The first is the language that other cities have used, that they've extended the program indefinitely until the end of the COVID-19 state of emergency. Who declares the state of emergency over? Is it the county or the governor? This seems a little, I'm not sure kind of what the criteria would be to end it, or I'm trying to wrap my head around what that would actually mean. I see Greg coming on too.
I think I could take that one. Effectively, the end of the state of emergency in California is the governor's state of emergency. We have our local state of emergency in San Carlos, but we've tied our declaration of emergency to the state's expiration. And so essentially, if we tie an extension to the state, unless you changed your mind later, you would be extending it until the governor ends the declaration of emergency.
And do you know what criteria he would use to end it? I mean, what would have to happen for the state of emergency to be over?
Well, that's I think that's sort of one of the mysteries out there right now is under the state law, the governor is supposed to end the state of emergency, excuse me, at the earliest possible date. But he's made the finding that he can't end it now because of because the virus is continuing to spread and causing the risk to the public's health and safety. So it could be quite a while until that happens. I would imagine, just thinking about how the metric that we have now with the color codes, that it would take most of the state being in yellow and an effective vaccine or other treatments that would mitigate the risks of the continuing spread. And that, I've heard all kinds of estimates that might be a year or two. It could be quicker because the announcement just this week about the effective vaccine. But that's going to take, at least, as Tara said earlier, it's going to take at least 6 months before we have ample supplies and people who want to be vaccinated will be able to do that. So it's at least 6 months, I would imagine, before the governor would do it. That's probably a guess. And then one other point while I'm here, I'm just commenting, just keep in mind that when we did this program in June, we based it on it being a temporary closure. So my preference is not to tie it to the end of the declaration of emergency, but to pick a date. Right now, the current resolution gives the discretion to the city manager to extend it to March now. But the reason it's on your agenda now is just because of the timing of our meeting schedule. We only have one more meeting. So I think, and then there's the reorganization meeting. I think the idea is you have an opportunity to give direction to the city manager to extend it to March or another date in the future is, I think, what staff's looking for.
Greg, and I had one other question for Stephen. I think, when do you expect the survey to be completed, or what was the deadline for businesses to respond to the survey about the electrical and heating investments?
So, so actually the survey was handled by Alice Faye's group, but I believe they're due on the 15th of November.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Laura. I'm sorry. Thank you, Sarah. Laura, next.
Thank you, Mayor Collins. And thank you for your question, Sarah, about the kind of end in sight. I think that's a really good question to ask. So two things. One is I'd like to explore a little bit more what was in the survey that went out to retailers and restaurants. It sounds like it was pretty much focused on really just the restaurant application of this. And so I'd like to better understand the thinking behind that. And then secondly, after that's addressed, I'd like to hear from the subcommittee with respect to their perspective on the situation. I also think it's interesting that we've pretty much only heard from restaurants tonight. So trying to get a broad view here of what's going on.
Mr. Mayor, I think I can try and answer some of those questions. So the intent of the survey, and this came out of a discussion that city staff had with the subcommittee, to the survey wasn't to talk about the closure of the street or anything like that. It was more about business operations, and there were 3 questions and then a follow-up question, and the questions focused on do you want or are you interested in extending the Parklet program beyond December 31st? Would you be interested in, and if so, the acknowledgement that if you're going to provide heat of some kind, there's a couple of ways to do it. One is with propane, with portable heaters, but as was stated earlier, you have to remove your tent. So would you be willing to extend electrical out to the street to provide electrical heating? And I think that was pretty much the extent of it. And there was an acknowledgement of the dollar value associated with investing in extending the electrical. And then it asked, do you have any other questions or comments? So that was the intent of the survey.
So it was then primarily focused on restaurants, it sounds like.
Well, we sent it out to everybody because not many retailers perhaps use the Parklet program, but now and again, retailers do put things out. And the survey went to 150 businesses in the downtown, so we didn't differentiate between restaurants and retailers.
Thank you. And then my second request was of the subcommittee to, if you could, I know you have all been very close to this, if you could share with us your perspective on where things stand at this moment, would be really helpful. Any takers?
I'm happy to give a perspective. Also wanted to just raise one question that I think maybe that we could add for consideration is, right now on that 600 block, there is a street closure on Sundays. And, that is parking that is potentially for retail as well. And I think the only real business that would be affected, I think, is the yoga studio has classes on that, on Cherry. But that might be something to think about as an in-between. I'm wondering if we could, as part of this, if we were to make a decision, can we also maybe open the street back up on Sundays that would obviously give more parking on Sundays for people, just as another thought. Is that something, Stephen, that could be done, or Greg, separately?
I think, I don't remember if we did that extra. Are you talking about the Cherry Street closure?
Cherry and 600 Street and the 600 block of Laurel.
They're closed on Sunday morning.
Right.
Well, right
they're
now
closed all day, Greg, on Sunday.
Oh, they're closed all day. Well, that's within the existing resolution, which allows the closure of the 600 block, and I think there was a separate one for authorized Cherry, or it was a city manager decision. I don't recall off the top of my head, but yeah, you could provide additional direction for that tonight.
Okay, just as an option. Okay,
yeah.
I'm happy to offer some, I guess, perspective on. I think, I think that we've talked about if we were to open back up the 700 block, it's, even if it was for a temporary, on the weekend, close it back on the weekends or open different things. I think it's a challenge to do because of the way it's structured right now. And you have all these pieces in place, all the parklets in place that aren't sort of fortified necessarily. So I think we're sort of in a situation where it's either we open it back up and we go back to normal and maybe we have a few parklets, or we keep it closed. I don't know that there's sort of a middle ground, unfortunately, the way things have sprung up around there. And I think Ron and I wanted to, hear from the other members of the council as well in terms of where things are. I think my leanings are that we should extend it, given that, what I'm hearing from the public in general is that it's popular, people like it, and it's something that is really helping a lot of businesses survive, and I think there is some impact to the retailers. So I would want, if we were to extend it, to be able to have a meeting with the retailers and the city staff, and understand kind of what technical services there may be and what sort of services, how we can work with them to help them out if we are going to extend the program. I think we have to reach out to the retailers and understand what they need and how we may help them. Some of it could be like, helping them get a website up so that they can do more online, business or things like that. I want us to reach out and do as part of this if we were to extend the program, because I want a thriving downtown that has a good mix of retail and restaurants, and we can't just help one and ignore the other.
Agreed. Thank you, Adam. I'll have a little bit more to say on that, but I want to get to Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two observations. One is, Al, I appreciated your answer to Vice Mayor Farmer Lohan, but in practice, well, I know staff didn't intend this, but in practice, the way you were asking the questions and the questions that were asked really were biased very heavily towards, or skewed very heavily towards, the restaurants. Because by my count, I think all but 3, I sometimes see a third non-restaurant business having at least some space. It's not always being used out on Laurel Street, but everything else, all the parklets are restaurant-based. And so, it's not a surprise that those are the ones we probably are going to hear back from, and that they would be interested in extending the program because that's the ones who are benefiting from it. And I would just like to really urge the council to think long and hard about what Adam just said, because I agree with it. When we set up this program back in May, we did it quickly, which is fine, but the intent was to help all the businesses. We weren't trying to pick winners and losers. We weren't saying that everybody was going to survive, but we were trying to be fair and even-handed with everybody. And the idea was, the basic concept was, by doing things like having outdoor dining to encourage people to come downtown, that would increase foot traffic to the stores, okay? Now, the people came downtown to the restaurants. It's absolutely clear that this worked very well for the restaurants. That second part of the equation did not happen. It has not happened, and we need to recognize that, okay? And that does not mean that we need to cut back on the help for the restaurants. That's like zero-sum thinking that makes no sense. But what I really think we need to do, particularly if we're going to extend this past December 31st, what we really need to do is figure out what other kinds of help and support we could provide for non-restaurant businesses that would give them a fighting chance too, because they're not getting it right now. We lost a business on Laurel Street this week, or I haven't closed yet, Harvest, next to Pete's. Nice store, had been there for quite a while. Fortunately, it's not their only outlet. They have another one in Redwood City that they're going to consolidate back into. But they were very clear to me when I went in there the other day. The reason they had to close was that their busiest shopping day in all the time they were in San Carlos was on Sunday. And that's the one day that the parking on Cherry and Laurel and that block of Laurel was closed off. And so people couldn't get to their store or chose not to. And having jacked a piece of furniture that I bought there out to my car, I can understand why somebody wouldn't necessarily want to move a piece of furniture, to Wheeler Plaza Garage. So anyway, I just hope that if we do opt to continue this thing past December 31st, which I'm fine supporting, I really hope that we will task staff and the subcommittee and ourselves to find some way to help these non-restaurant businesses, because we have not done that so far, and it's just not right. So, and I know other people know that too. So I'm not trying to accuse people of doing something wrong. I just think we need to recognize that we didn't hit the mark, which is okay, but we need to adjust things. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mark. I also agree. We do need to do some more outreach, and I think that's something that we're going to make sure that we pursue. Adam?
Thank you, Mayor Collins. I just want to quickly respond to Mark's comment, and I appreciate them because, like as I mentioned, we do want to help all the businesses, and that's why I mentioned the Sunday street opening up again as an option to do that. And I think, Mark, I would just on one point that you made, I don't necessarily disagree. Is I just don't know that we know the answer to how all the retail is affected. We haven't done that survey because some people are taking advantage of the parklets and maybe doing better than others, and some of it could be because of COVID. And I think we need to do that outreach. I just think we may not have all the data where we have more data around restaurants. And I don't disagree with what you're saying and how we need to help the restaurants. I mean, the retail, and I've stated that as well tonight. I just think we need more data too around retail.
Well,
and to hear from them.
I think that would be great, and I want to be really clear here. I am not, with this next comment, trying to pat myself on the back, but you may remember a month or so ago when we last talked about this, that was, in a way, the very key issue I raised, which is we need more data. We need to understand how things are impacting the businesses differently, okay, because they are impacting them differently. And the response that came back, staff was they did not think that there was a way to do that. And I accepted that sort of at the time, but maybe the challenge is, guys, we don't care whether you think there's a way to do it or not, find a way to do it, okay? Because it's important, because otherwise we can't make the decision, and that's what we have to do, is make the decision. And one other thing, Adam, just to reiterate, we do have a little bit of anecdotal data tonight. The only person we heard from who did not own and operate a restaurant was opposed to us extending the things, and nobody else called in. It would be interesting. It would have been interesting if a few of the non-restaurant businesses had called in and said, "This is great. I love it. Let's just keep doing it." But not one person did that, and that's not proof, but it's interesting.
I think it's interesting. I would say that on the other hand, anecdotally, I've heard from at least two retailers who were happy with the street closures or to having the parklets as well. I mean, I think it's, we've all heard anecdotally and had talked to different people. So there's, I think until we can get a survey, we won't have a good perspective.
Which is why it's too bad we didn't push staff to find a way to do that a month ago. I agree.
Thank you, Mark and Adam. I believe we still have time. I'd like to move on to Laura for a moment.
Great, thank you, Mayor Collins. So I appreciate the discussion and the various perspectives here and the dialogue. I'm confident that we're all doing our best to play the difficult hand that COVID has dealt us the past few months. This has not been easy by any stretch for anybody, regardless of where you sit or what role you play or what type of business that you have. And I think it's really still the beginning of the race with no visible finish line. So while we got good news about a vaccine, I think that there's still a lot of hurdles, and it's going to take some time for that to get out, distributed to the broad public. And, the other piece of this is just in general how people are going to feel about resuming life like they did prior to the pandemic. I mean, that's a whole nother psychological factor that's going to have to be dealt with over time. And, I have many of the same questions I think all of you have that you've raised tonight, which is, how do we best navigate this next phase? We know that our retailers, merchants, and restaurants want us to listen and provide clear and definitive directions so that they can make plans and choices that are best for their businesses, right? I think a lot of what I've heard through some of the work that I've done through the county recovery plan is that the kind of back and forth between the different opening and closing has wreaked havoc. What I'm hearing now is, do I make an investment in shoring up my parklet? Do I not? I have, Christmas and holidays coming, and I want to be able to sell to my customers, but they're telling me that they're not willing to come down because they don't feel comfortable. So I'm also hearing many of you talk about the fact that we need more data. And so while I'm glad that there's a survey out, I think, making a decision tonight might be a little bit early. And if we can, gather as much perspective as we can to really understand fully, what we need to do in this next phase, I think, the community is counting on us to do the right thing. And that this really does need to be community driven. So, I echo the sentiment raised about, both Adam and Mark about, can we, in very short order, really try to bring all of these different perspectives together, because some of the things I'm hearing are really interesting ideas, but I don't know what we can and can't do. I don't know what's feasible, what's not feasible, and much of it will have an impact on the duration of this particular end date, if you will. So I really appreciate the thoughtful dialogue this evening. And I know that this is not easy for any of us, and especially those who are calling and trying to figure out how to make a go of it during these times.
Thank you, Laura. Adam, I was just thinking, and this is really speaking now also to Al and to Stephen, is that maybe what we ought to do is meet with the non-restaurant owners, and set up a meeting with them. I mean, we've heard from the restaurant owners. We know exactly what their sentiments are, and obviously we want to continue to help them, but maybe it would be helpful if we reached out to the non-restaurant businesses and had a sit down with them or Zoom meeting or whatever's appropriate, and find out what strategies we might work on that would benefit them. So I'm just thinking out loud, and we can talk later about that. Mark, I'm going to get to you in a minute. I want to get to Sarah. She's been waiting patiently.
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you both. I appreciate that. I want to thank the Vice Mayor for getting us back on track too. I appreciated your comments, Laura. And I wanted to kind of add a few thoughts that, we did the street closure for our businesses, but we also did the street closure for our community. And we haven't talked much about our community. We've been talking a lot about retail and restaurants, and the last time that we discussed this topic back in September, we received many emails that day from residents who said the only reason they come downtown is because the street is closed and because they like having that room to spread out, and it makes them feel safe that they can bring their kids and they can social distance. And so I think that there's many different kind of tracks that we can think about. I don't see them as oppositional. Like Adam, I've heard from some retailers who like the street closure as well. So I appreciate the ideas to reach out to our retailers. I think that's a really important avenue that we need to get a little more clarity on, but I'm not sure that everybody will hold the same opinion. So I also really, I've heard kind of from many different, the community and restaurant owners, that we just, clarity is really needed right now. The Vice Mayor noted that, they're looking at making substantial investments to get through the winter time. And the longer that we hold off on making our decision, they're kind of left in limbo too. And I don't like limbo. I think that it's our job to be decision makers and to figure this out and give everybody some clarity. So I'm in favor of extending it indefinitely, like Mountain View and Redwood City. And if we hear from our businesses that that isn't clear enough, then maybe we can actually set another date. And I also wanted to say that we are doing things to support retailers. We kicked off our Shop Local campaign, and we sent this postcard to the whole community, and staff has worked really hard on making an excellent website. Al's team and Steven's team, there's a ton of really great parking maps on here now on our websites. So, you know, there is good work being done by our city staff behind the scenes, and, you know, we'll continue to work on that going forward. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. Yep, no, I am unmuted. An observation and just also something to pass along to, I don't know, the subcommittee or staff or whoever is going to look into this. I think it might also be worthwhile if you could do it quickly. It might be worthwhile to talk to two focus groups of San Carlos residents, one group of people who are coming down there now, the way things are currently set up, and one group of people who used to come down and now are not, rarely, and sort of get their perspectives in each case about what it is that makes them, that they find attractive down there, and what it is that they find unattractive in the second group for why they're not there, just because that might help guide choices that we make. You know, I think the important thing I want to emphasize again is this isn't a zero-sum game. It's not like, I don't want anybody to take my comments that are like, oh, we've done too much for the restaurants, we need to stop helping the restaurants. That's not at all the case. But while I respect that people have heard from other non-restaurant business owners who say they're fine with the existing situation, most of the ones I've talked to are not, and they're pretty unhappy with it and pretty discouraged. And so that represents an opportunity for us to do better for our community. And if we do better for them and more people start coming down, then that's better for the community too. So just some thoughts and things that you guys may be able to work on the subcommittee.
All right, thanks, Mark. Adam, back to you.
Thank you, Mayor Collins. Sarah, can I follow up with you? Because Greg said that from a legal standpoint, he prefers sort of a date certain. Would you be open to a date certain down the road if we were to kind of move forward with something?
Yes.
Okay. And then, I mean, I think all these things that are being suggested, I think don't have to be, we don't have to put things on hold to get, you know, do a focus group or to get the more data. And Sarah, thanks for bringing up the postcard and stuff, because I did get that as well, and I appreciate staff's work around that. So I mean, I would be comfortable voting to extend the program today, but knowing that we would kind of put some of these other measures in place to try to understand, get some more feedback from retail, understand from the focus groups, and understand how we might move things around a little bit, but to give some more certainty to, you know, those who do need to make investments at this point, because I get that we don't want to wait, keep pushing it off, and then, you know, we sort of put people in a difficult situation. I think certainty is important.
Laura?
So I guess question for staff. So I'm, you know, with respect to the certainty perspective, I think, you know, to your point, Adam, providing some certainty, but I'm sensing that some program modifications may be needed. But again, like I said, I'm not quite sure what. So, you know, what are you thinking in terms of extension? Because I think if we could do this work in parallel, but maybe bring in the date, so we do provide them some window with ROI. Is that kind of how you're thinking about this?
I mean, I would, and I agree, Laura. And I think we can pivot on some of the programs if we're going to make modifications. We could do that, whether it's a Sunday closure or other things or programs while it's going on. I mean, I'd be fine with March 31st or some point in April as well if we wanted to extend it to the end of April. You know, either of those would be fine for me. I want to, you know, I guess to Greg's point, I don't want to. I mean, because I don't know that I want to push it out like 12 months or something. I think I'd rather be able to have. I think the forcing function of have us looking at it every once in a while is good, and I think if we pushed out enough, people would hopefully get enough return on their investment to know that there's at least that much certainty.
Thank you.
Mark, before we go to you, Greg, I just want to ask if we if we were to give the direction tonight to say extend the program to March 31st, since there seems to be a preference for date certains, could we do what we've done so far and give the city manager the discretion to extend it for a period of time beyond that? Or would we need to come back in again and say, you know, we want another month or 2 or 3 of an extension or some other decision?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, you have the flexibility to create that option for the city manager to extend. But I think in practice, what's going to happen is the city manager is going to come to you and ask for the council to review the decision anyway. So I think you could do it either way. You know, I mean, I think we did it first because there was so many unknowns about how it would play out in June when we were looking forward at this. You know, picking a date, you can always extend it past the date. One of the issues that you might recall from the first time we did is, you know, we can do temporary closures, but there's a whole set of findings to do a more permanent closure that we have not addressed at all. In this, we're relying on the emergency declaration to authorize a temporary closure of a public street. So so extending it too long, I think, starts to seem like it's not so temporary. So I prefer a date certain for that reason, because it gives us an argument that, yeah, of course it's temporary, and then you'll make new findings to extend it in a future date if that's necessary.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully we can sort of move to a decision here, but Mark, maybe you've got some ideas along those lines.
Well, I guess I do have an idea, although it probably won't meet with any interest from people. To point out, the observation I wanted to make is, you know, we need to be careful as a practical political matter. Extending the program to March basically guarantees that it will last at least until March. I just want to make sure everybody's clear about that, because, you know, some people may be thinking, well, we can learn stuff and adjust things along the way, but in practice, the political cost of going to somebody saying, well, we learned a bunch of stuff and now we're going to end it at the end of this part of it, the end of January, is like, whoa, I don't think that's going to fly. So, you know, whatever date you pick is going to be the minimum date, not something that we can dance within. And the observation I wanted to make is, I know that there are other priorities that staff is working on, but this is obviously a fairly important one if you think about the amount of time we spent talking about it the last few months and the impact it has on our downtown and on the broader community. I may have missed something, but I haven't heard any of the questions or ideas for research and whatnot that people have brought up. I am hard pressed to see how they're even more than, like, you know, even in the holiday season, more than like a month and a half's worth of work, okay, or maybe 2 months from where we sit now, which basically says mid-January. You know, for me, I would be okay with extending the program to the end of January and deliberately putting a relatively short shot clock on it, saying, let's get the other information we want in before then, so that we can say, well, maybe we're going to extend it to June, or maybe we're going to end it in February. But to basically make a fairly quick decision, because ambiguity, as people have pointed out, is not a good thing for anybody. So.
Okay, Sarah?
Thank you. So my idea is to extend it until September of next year, in line with what Palo Alto is doing. And I think that's what I heard from Stephen, that the businesses who have platform parklets, which many of our restaurants downtown have, that's what Palo Alto is doing. I don't think that extending it to March is a confidence booster for our restaurants who are going to invest, you know, $6,000 to $8,000 in heating and lighting. That seems very, in my mind, that's just, it's not long enough to give them certainty and confidence in making those purchases. I I also would rather not give the city manager the opportunity to extend. I think that should be a council decision, which Greg mentioned. And I think that this is just a very fluid situation, but I don't see the state of emergency ending in March. I see it going much longer than that. So, you know, I think that every time this comes up, you know, we have this whole community discussion about extending it, not extending it. People have to call in. So I would rather have a longer time frame, but definitely support, you know, simultaneously doing more outreach and figuring out ways that we can help everyone. But I think having the street closed is what the community at large has felt comfortable with. So those are my thoughts.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Well, is there any support for Sarah's idea of extending it through next September? I am not seeing a great amount of enthusiasm on this by this group.
Sarah, I would meet you in the middle somewhere, but I don't know if I could go all the way to September at this point, not knowing. Without more data on the impact on some of the other businesses. I mean, I could go to June or something, or end of June, but I would just want to. And I guess we can always change it and flip it back if we did September and move it. Is that an ability for us to do, Greg? If we were to say fine, and then we did a bunch of survey data and said, yeah, we're going to lose every retail business in downtown or something, and we have to change it. Nope. Is Greg frozen?
Yeah, we're not. Greg, can you hear us?
I think he's frozen.
I think we might have temporarily lost him. Well, while he's coming back, Laura, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think I'm trying to synthesize all these different perspectives because I think everybody has really great points. And I think I feel like the September data is just a little too far out, Sarah, just because by then, again, hopefully, according to Dr. Fauci, everyone for the most part will be vaccinated, right? But again, there's also that last 10% that may not be. And, to your point, Adam, about maybe bringing in a date, I heard Mark saying, I think I agree with them that if we set a date for when the program is going to be, an expiration date, the businesses are going to expect to be able to count on that, and they're going to make decisions accordingly. So I would hesitate to, again, going back to what I've heard before, that they don't like is a lack of, things changing very rapidly, right? On again, off again is not something that they can tolerate. And I like where you were going with it earlier, Adam, about, could we meet somewhere in the middle and make program modifications and improvements and optimize it based on the feedback that we're all interested in gathering, right? So maybe we do it far enough out in the future to enable us to gather that information and, make some improvements in the program. That whatever that date is, right? I think we all wish we had that magic 8-ball with us right now. It's anybody's guess.
Well, I'm gonna split the difference, or as Bob Grisilli always used to say, split the baby here. I'm gonna throw out June 30th as a prospective end date, and we can fight over that. So, I'd like to get. Is anybody willing to make that motion?
Sure. Sarah, did you want to comment first before?
Well, I just wanted to say I understand absolutely what everyone's saying. Also, summertime is the height of outdoor dining. So would we really open up the street during the summertime? I was thinking, September, you get through the spring, you get through the summer when everyone wants to be outside dining. I think that there will be a mentality to overcome of people still wanting to dine outside, even when restaurants are open on the inside. We see that right now where restaurants are open at 50% capacity, but people still prefer to dine outside. So I was just thinking of kind of the seasonality of this and, spring, summer, but I'm here for compromise.
All right, Laura.
So, Sarah, I hear what you're saying. I'm wondering if there could be some things that we put in place, though, that still enable us to do outdoor dining, is what I'm wondering. But again, I don't know if those things could be done before then or not. But a few council meetings ago, we agreed to review our parklet program, for example. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Right. And, following up on something that Mark said earlier, I think it regardless of what end date we set, I agree. We should get more data and do more outreach sooner rather than later, and make sure that we're comfortable with whatever date certain that we decide on. Mark?
Yeah. The observation I was going to make is we may be looking a little bit too narrowly about the implications of particular end dates. And I thought of this when Sarah was making her comment about a June 30th end date, which falls in the middle of prime outdoor dining season. The reality is that outdoor dining is not necessarily incompatible. It might be more limited in some respects, but it's not necessarily incompatible with opening the street up, for example, to allow more on-street parking or people to get to and from whatever parking is there. Certainly the northernmost block of Laurel Street is in fact set up that way. The block of Laurel Street or block of 2 of Laurel Street that we've closed off could have been set up that way. It can't now, just because the businesses like Town that built more parklets did not build the parklets in a way that, as Steve explained to us a couple of months ago, that the walls of the parklet would survive a vehicular collision. But the earlier parklet that Town built was built that way. Okay, so it's not like it violates the laws of physics to do that. It's a matter of investing money, and certainly businesses would want to know that their investment was going to have a period of time to pay off in. But I mention all this just because you could pick a date that's what appears to be in the middle of the peak season, and then think about making some adjustments, saying that, well, we're going to allow this, but we'll extend it further, but you have to rebuild your parklet so that it's up to code to deal with vehicles. So just something to think about.
All right. Well, we've kind of batted this around. I've thrown out a suggestion. I think I'm ready to hear some sort of a motion.
All right. Sarah, I'm going to go along with you on this one because I hear what you're saying about the end of the summer, because if we're going to keep it that long, we might as well do it. So I'll make that motion and see what happens. And if not, I'm comfortable with June 30th. That's a fallback. So I move we extend the parklet. Is there I guess I should find the official. I move to adopt resolution
2020-083.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving the establishment of an end date on September 1st of the temporary downtown street closure program.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Crystal, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Parma Lohan?
Yes.
Councilmember Rack?
Yes.
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
No.
And Mayor Collins?
No. Well, we have 3 yeses and 2 noes, so I guess we are extending it to September 1st. Any other bits of information that staff needs that we should make clear, Greg?
I think there's some, and Tara can chime in here, but I think the direction to look at the impacts on an ongoing basis, I think, is what I have also heard in addition to the motion you've made.
Yeah,
yes,
I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say specifically, I believe we really need to reach out to those non-restaurant businesses and find ways that we can work with them, accommodate them, ease the pain in whatever way we can, so that we don't lose them. So I would, I think, Adam and I will I'm sure, I'm sure you agree, Adam. We'll work on that as a subcommittee.
And I didn't mention it. We didn't talk this through on the was on the Sunday closure for that. I guess that may be an item we can bring back if we need to, if we decide to open up the street on Sunday. I guess we didn't include that in the motion. We didn't discuss it enough. So
does that fall under the purview of the subcommittee, Greg, if we want to make that sort of in program modification?
Yes, it does. And I think the original reso, which you're not totally modifying, gave some authority for modifications to the city manager with input. And I'm sure he would take input from the subcommittee, or if he felt like the council needed to look at it again, he'd bring it back to the council for something significant.
And I'd like to know if the council would like us to ask the question about the Sunday closure as part of our outreach, or do you just want to make a decision at the subcommittee level and not include that in the surveys?
Well, I'd be in favor of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Let's get the data.
Yeah, I would agree.
More input's better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think we can do that. We'll look at a bunch of different ways that we can complete these surveys. And I think the subcommittee would be a good place to determine what other kinds of outreach you might like to do. You guys have mentioned like town hall situations with various groups, and we can look into that as well as part of the outreach. But the goal will be to try to hear from as many businesses as we can that are impacted down there.
Yeah. If I may, I think it would also be important, what I'm hearing is that there is a lot of collaboration and discussion being had across different business owners and different types of businesses with one another. And I'm hearing, proposed solutions that may be acceptable. So to the extent to which it can be done is to try to draw those out and then put back in front of the community some of these solutions, I think would be very helpful, because I'm hearing a lot of ideation and creativity occurring and some innovation. So to the extent that, and I'd be happy to share with you some of those things that I've been hearing, but maybe there could be a pre-step that's done, right? So that way, people are aligning not just on, keep it open, keep it closed, right? But, how do we optimize the program and make downtown a more enjoyable experience for everyone involved?
Yeah, I think all the ideas that we can generate, either from council or from these surveys, are more than welcome, so that we can build the best program we can.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because I think your comment about town hall, Tara, probably traces back to my suggestion about a focus group or a couple of focus groups. I just want to be clear, to the extent that your idea did trace back to that. I was specifically saying focus group because a focus group is very different from a town hall. The point of the focus group is really to try and study in a representative sample, but a small sample of populations of people who are currently using the downtown or not using the downtown but used to, what their motivations are, okay? Solely to provide information to inform the subcommittee or the council for its ideation process. It's a little different in that sense. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
I appreciate the clarification.
Adam?
Yeah, just one. Thank you, Mayor Collins. So just so I understand, so if we were looking at the focus groups as an option, that we will reach out to retail and restaurant, and I know, Mark, you talked about just focus groups, but have we thought about doing a general survey for the public as well? No, I'd like to make sure we include people who aren't going downtown, because that's an important piece of it, to understand that. So I don't know if we can do all those things and get all that data, or whether that's too much.
This reminds me a little bit of what my contractor who taught me when he was building my house, and I kept asking him, "Can we do this?" And he'd say, "We can do anything."
Yeah, Adam, I think we got to be a little careful there. I mean, we can lose our focus, and we can start impacting budget and staff time.
Yeah, so I think at least doing the focus groups at a minimum would be good, because I would like to hear, as Mark points out, from people who aren't coming downtown and understand why.
Right.
As well as people who are coming down and why they're coming down.
The reason I didn't suggest a survey like that is simply because I thought it would take too long and be expensive. But, on the other hand, we have extended this program through September, and, that's a long time. So
yeah, we have time. Okay, one final thought before we move on. I did promise one of our constituents, restaurant constituents, I had a exchange with Sema Tosin, who owns one of the owners of Stamp, and I want to thank her for her personal outreach. Apparently, she has reached out to many of the businesses on Laurel Street that are not restaurants, and she has been talking to them as well. And I'm hopeful that there is a great deal of dialogue amongst all the business owners out there. So anyway, thank you, Sema, for that effort. We need more outreach and communication, not only by us, but by the business owners themselves. Okay, let us move on. We are now on to council communications. These are just general reports by council members on their meetings and doings. And I'm just wondering if anybody's got any things they'd like to report out on. We'll start with Laura.
Thank you. Just a real quick item, Mayor Collins and Council. So I just attended the San Mateo Progress Seminar this last Friday. This year's seminar is taking place over multiple Fridays for just a few hours each Friday. The keynote address this last Friday was by State Treasurer Fiona Ma, who shared that despite the economic recession, California is on good financial footing. And this is the perception of the outside market. So that was reassuring to me, and I thought I would pass that along. There's also other good discussion that was had there, but that was a highlight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment, this is actually would be an agenda item, except it actually doesn't involve the council. Recently, the council was faced with making a choice on who to appoint to various commission slots and backup lists for those slots. In at least one instance, the argument was made that we pick one candidate over another because of the candidates, because one of the candidates would enhance diversity. I'm all for diversity. It lets us get more viewpoints incorporated into our public decision making and gives more people a stake in local government, which I think is extremely important. But I have to admit, I've always been a little conflicted about choosing one candidate over another in the final analysis based on what he or she looks like. It just doesn't seem fair somehow. I'd almost rather put all the qualified candidates into a pool and pick finalists at random, giving everyone deemed qualified the same shot at the position. That's not a perfect answer either, of course. I don't really have a simple answer to the conundrum, but there is one thing I can do, and that's what this announcement is that I'm making tonight. I'm shortly going to have a lot more time on my hands because I'll be leaving the council. I will always be willing to meet with anyone who is interested in pursuing a public role, elected or appointed, to give them advice on how to secure one. And I am particularly interested in meeting with St. Carlins, individually or in groups, who feel themselves to be part of an underrepresented group. So please, if you have any questions about stepping up to serve the community, give me a call at 650-868-3367 or drop me a line at mark@olbert.com. I'm here to help. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Sarah?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick update. I attended our library governing board meeting this morning, and I just wanted to let the community know that there are a couple new programs. You can check out sewing machines from various libraries, which is a fun new addition. There's also grab and go book bundles at our library as well, where you don't have to check out the books. They're books for preschoolers, they're picture books and board books, and there's a bundle of like 6 or 7, and you just drive up and you pick one and you take it home. So that's a fun new offering. And also, we're all doing curbside pickup now at our library. And if you don't want to make an appointment, you don't have to. You can do it either way. You can just show up and get your books on hold or make an appointment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Adam.
I just wanted to, and this is more just coming up at sort of preview for at the next meeting, we will be considering Atherton's withdrawal from the SBWMA. And so I just want to sort of remind people that they have an end of December deadline for that. And in general, the board, well, this will come up, voted in favor of it. But, you know, it's coming up. It's something I support given the information I have, but we can have a bigger discussion. But want to give people a heads up that that's coming.
Thanks, Adam. And Atherton has also requested that their train stop be eliminated from the Caltrain line. So they are definitely going in their own direction. The only thing I have to report out on is many of you may have read that Measure RR, the measure to add a 1/8 cent sales tax, passed with an overwhelming 70+% in all three. I think the lowest it got was 67 or 68% in Santa Clara County. That's $100 million a year after 30 years of Caltrain finally being one of the largest commuter railroads that finally has its own dedicated funding source. So we were very worried that without that, Caltrain might not be running after the end of the year. But my thanks to everyone who voted for Measure RR. Okay, the next is we did have an agenda setting item, which is the consideration of agendizing an item to discuss and designate a district name for the East Side. I forgot who
That's mine.
That was Adams. Thank you, Adam.
That's fine. And I think, I brought this up because, you know, the discussion came up a few weeks ago with when we were doing the sign exception for Alexandria. And I really actually would love for this to be more just considered as part of the work that's being done with community development to look at kind of what our plan is for the East Side, to maybe to consider having a district named or a district created so that we understand sort of the parameters of what that looks like. I feel like when we talk about the industrial arts area, we know what that is. And so I would of the mindset that we create something similar for the biotech area, so we understand kind of what parameters we're placing around the developers and have a sort of an understanding of what that district is. And I'd like to include it, actually just include it with Al's work that he's doing that we approved a few weeks ago.
So are you suggesting that it just be part of that rather than having an agenda item?
I mean, unless we need a separate agenda item to actually do the creation, but I would like them to consider that. I don't think we brought that up as part of the consideration for what work is going on already. And so I'd like to, I guess my preference would be to have it included in the work that's being done now, so that there's a recommendation about what that boundary is, what it looks like, and then we can vote it all as a whole.
Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I was sort of starting to laugh here a little bit, Adam, because congratulations. I think you have figured out a way to do an end run around the whole process of agenda setting agenda items by voting on them that Greg has forced us to follow. So, because you basically what you were proposing is either setting an agenda item for this or giving direction to staff. Well, the latter one is something technically we can't do, may not be able to do because it's not an agendized topic. However, as a practical matter, I am happy to have whatever discussion or give whatever direction we need to do what you're talking about. And frankly, incorporating it as part of the bigger project probably makes more sense than trying to pick a name now, because the process is going to define the thing that we're eventually going to end up naming. But however we do it, I'm happy to support what you're talking about.
Greg, are we walking a fine line here?
Yeah. I think we're getting close to it. I think I would say that it's the choices are either no action, and then when it comes back, we'll rediscuss what we want to do in as we're reviewing this future project, or set it for an agenda item to kind of flesh out some of those issues.
Okay. Ron, do you know when Al is going to be bringing something back on that? In other words, when's the next time that it would come up for discussion?
Well, I think I'm going to let Al answer that question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Well, we intend to bring forward a contract to hire a consulting team to assist the city in the preparation plan, and that would be on November 23rd. So that's the next time. What you would be, we would be recommending is that you give the city manager authority to sign the contract and move forward with the project. And at that time, we'll present to you the scope of services from the consultant, the dollar value, and it'll talk about the boundaries. That we'll have a map and that kind of thing. There will be a placeholder name because we do need to refer to the area as something. And so, you can change the name moving forward, or as you do more research and kind of look at that area and look at other parts of the city, because as we discussed in an earlier meeting, there may be some changes north of Hawley at some point in the near future that you look at as well. And so maybe we need to take a broader look at what we call these different areas, but that will be the next time you see it, November 23rd.
So if I may, it sounds like, Greg and Al, it sounds like a discussion of the things Adam was talking about could take place during that item, right?
I think that sounds like it to me. Yeah, it sounds like it's relevant to the agenda.
I'm good with that.
And that's faster than you get it any other way.
That's right. I'll take my ball and go home now. That's it.
There you go.
Sounds good. Okay, any staff comments on administrative business?
Actually, yes. Put my face on there. Just wanted to let everybody know that the city will be closed to recognize Veterans Day on Wednesday, this Wednesday, the 11th. And we want to thank all our veterans for their service.
Great. Well, thank you, Tara. And I'll use my mayor's prerogative to just bring up one last item that I did neglect at the last meeting. Our last meeting was held on my mother-in-law's 100th birthday, which happened to be 2 days before my granddaughter was born. So it's been a big 2 weeks around the Collins household.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, we gave her a proclamation and everything. My wife gave her a Zoom party, and she had all of her children and grandchildren and stepchildren and all these relatives from all over the country. So it was a lot of fun. Okay. Yes.
I just wanted to ask if it might be possible. I was going to make some comment about Veterans Day as well, so I'm glad that Tara did. Would it be possible for you to consider closing the meeting tonight in honor of all of America's veterans, seeing as what we're engaged in would not be possible in large part without their efforts?
I would be happy to do so. So tonight's meeting is adjourned on behalf of all veterans that have fought to defend our country.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned. We'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.